Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here today with my August 2020 media wrap-up video. So this is where I talk about all of the media that I consumed in the month of August that was not a book. Now that said, if you do want to see what books I finished last month, definitely check out my August book wrap-up. I talk about all 9 books that I finished last month, so check that out if you're interested. Today though, I talk about everything else, which, much like the previous few months, the only other media I consumed this past month in August was movies. So this is essentially a movie wrap-up. But good news is September is already looking much more interesting because I do have some video games to talk about in my next month's wrap-up, which you'll find in a few weeks here on the channel. So I have 14 movies to talk about today. I actually watched 20 films, I think it was last month, but 6 of those were for my Walt Disney Animation Studio film tier ranking video series that I'm doing. So you can see some of those in part 1 of that I already released, and some of the rest of those will be in part 2, which I just have a couple more to get through. It's just been a slog through this era because I don't look forward to watching them because they're not the type of films I enjoy. So I'm working my way through them. I promise I am definitely going to release part 2 here, hopefully sometime in the next, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. We'll see. But yeah, so look for my reviews of those in those separate videos. But like I said, 14 other films to talk about today. And frankly, I'm going to try to get through them a little bit quicker than normal, just so I don't keep you here for your entire afternoon or whatever the case may be. So without wasting any more time and without any further ado, let's dive right in. So I will go through these in the order I watched them like I normally did. So the first one I finished last month was The Pool from 2018, and I watched this one streaming on Shudder. The director of this one is Ping Lumpraping. I'm saying that completely wrong. I apologize. I am butchering that. This one, like I mentioned, was on Shudder, and it was frankly the reason I wanted to sign up for Shudder. This is essentially this this guy who our main character is basically works like in the tech side of film, and he is at this old abandoned like Olympic-sized swimming pool, and they just got done filming a music video there that day. Well, he ends up falling asleep on a raft, and he gets trapped in this pool because there's no escape ladder or anything like that because it's old and abandoned. Well, unfortunately, he's not only trapped in this pool, but he's not alone. He's also trapped in there with an alligator. So this will actually mark the first of 2 films I watched last month where people are basically the prey to an alligator or a crocodile. I forget which is which, but one of those 2 deadly creatures. Let me correct myself. It is a crocodile, not an alligator, and I think both of the films are actually crocodiles, not alligators. And if you know the difference, power to you. I couldn't tell you the difference at all. But either way, this one, The Pool, is just that, trying to see if this guy will be able to, 1, escape the pool, and 2, escape with his life thanks to this crocodile that he is sharing this pool with. And it's about as absurd as you would expect it to be from that description of it. But I think my problem with it, and frankly, I enjoyed it, but I think my problem with it was that there was just so many like absurd and ridiculous things that kept happening to this character that it was just to the point of ridiculous. Like, every time something maybe halfway decent would go right, it's just like 4 other things went wrong, including like, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but like including like another person being there. Like that goes wrong also, which is just ridiculous. Like the whole thing is just such an absurd situation. And when you're watching the film, it just keeps getting more and more absurd each little moment that passes. So while I think this one was good, it was well shot. It kept the tension up throughout the entire thing, which, I don't think is too difficult to do when you're dealing with a crocodile. I think the special effects on this were pretty good, like the blood and the gore effects. I will say, though, that the crocodile CGI was a bit hit and miss throughout this. When it was very clearly CGI, it took me out of it. But it was, very evident that they must have had a real crocodile that they were filming with also. And so when those shots were there, it looked great. It's just some of the more CGI moments felt a little hokey, so that part was a little bit disappointing. The other thing that was a little bit disappointing with this film is that the ending felt I guess the only way to describe it would be a little too Hollywood, which is interesting because this is not an English film. This is a film from Thailand, and so it is spoken in Thai. And I didn't expect the ending to be quite the way it was, which, you know, it's not unfulfilling. It's not a cliffhanger or anything like that. It's just, one of those type of endings. So that was a little bit disappointing. And again, I could talk more if I wanted to talk spoilers, but I don't. So I'm just going to leave that at that. Overall, I would say The Pool was pretty good. I thought it was entertaining. I was engaged from start to finish. I thought there were some really cool moments. The director very clearly has talent, so I'd definitely be interested in watching more from him. It's just overall, with this premise being right up my alley, it didn't quite deliver as much as I wanted it to. So I ended up giving The Pool from 2018 3 out of 5 stars. The next film I finished last month was one that has been on my list for just the longest time. I've been wanting to see this film for so long, so I'm glad I finally ended up sitting down and watching it last month. And this is Fido from 2006, directed by Andrew Curry. So this actually has Trinity from The Matrix as the matriarch character in here, and she does a wonderful job. But and then it has Dylan Baker, I believe his name is, who is obviously a very well-known actor as well. He's great in this. The little boy, I didn't recognize him, but I thought he did a fine job here too. So this one is essentially a zombie comedy film. It takes place in the 50s, and this like radiation or something has happened where the dead are rising from the graves and they are zombies. And so this corporation called Zomcom has created these like collars that go around their necks in order to tame them, to housebreak them, if you will. And so if you have money, you can then purchase these zombies with this like taming collar, and then they will perform housework for you. Or if you're the weird neighbor or down the road, they might do other things, but I won't talk about that here. So this was kind of an odd movie. I thought it was going to be much more comedy heavy than it ended up being, but it was a lot more sentimental than I expected. So not that that's a bad thing. I always, tend to enjoy that, but coming into this after everything I've heard about it over the past, 14 years now, I just expected a heavier comedy film than I got. Still, even though it wasn't quite what I was expecting, it's still an enjoyable film. I think they do a really good job with it. It's kind of a, more unique take on the zombie genre, especially, considering it was released in 2006. So I think they do a really good job with it. I think the acting across the board is really well done. I was interested in the characters. I wanted to know how their stories would play out. So, kudos to this. So I ended up watching Fido on Amazon Prime. So if it's, it might still be there by the time you watch this video. So you can check it out if you're interested. But I ended up giving 2006's Fido 3 out of 5 stars. Next on the list is one that I am so happy I finally watched, and this is As Above, So Below from 2014, directed by John Eric Dowdle. So if you guys have been following the channel, or if you followed the podcast, in yesteryear, you'll know how much I love found footage films. And this is one that kind of went under my radar. I didn't even realize it was a found footage film for the longest time. Now, that said, I did edit a review that my buddy put up on Cinefessions.com, and so of course, that was when the film came out back in 2014. So I just forgot, I guess, since then. And I just never got around to it. But I did finally watch this one. I think I own a digital version of this. So I watched it that way on like Movies Anywhere or Vudu, whichever one I own it on. And I will say, I absolutely love this film. If you are a found footage fan, you need to watch this movie. It is so well done. So essentially, this takes place in like the catacombs under Paris. These explorers, or whatever you want to call them, are searching for something very specific. And specifically, our main character, or the main actress, is basically trying to like finish the work that her father set out to do, but he recently passed away. And so she's trying to finish what he started. And it just is absolutely creepy, as you would expect it to be, being set underground in like these underground catacombs of Paris. It is so good. I cannot recommend As Above, So Below enough. The acting has to be spot on for a found footage film to work, and it works so well here. I thought the acting across the board was fantastic. Like basically with a found footage film, if it looks like the actors are acting, then I'm out of it. You don't have that same effect. It needs to feel like I'm watching watching someone go through this terrible situation, and that's what it feels like here. They do such a wonderful, naturalistic job. It works so well. If you like found footage, if you like the horror genre, and I know some people just hate found footage films, but this one, you know, you don't get a ton of like shaky cam. There is some, obviously, but it's not a ton of it like you do in like Blair Witch Project or something like that. And this is just one of the better ones. This and probably The Taking of Deborah Logan are probably two of my favorite found footage films of all time. I mean, Lake Mungo is another great one. I can just keep going on and on, which I plan to do at some point here in the near future, talk about my favorite subgenres of horror. That'll give me a little more freedom to talk more specifically about found footage, but I love the genre. As Above, So Below is one of the standouts in the genre. Absolutely recommended. I gave 2014's As Above, So Below 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next up on the list is one that took me by surprise simply because I didn't realize it was a hard R comedy, and this is 2012's The Campaign, directed by Jay Roach. So this is a Will Ferrell comedy vehicle. So if you like those films, you'll probably like this. If you don't, you probably won't. Fortunately, I am on the side that really enjoys Will Ferrell, and it's co-starring with Zach Galifianakis, who I think both of these guys are just hilarious. And so I laughed a lot more than I probably should have at this film. But it is so absurd, so ridiculous, and it's not a good movie by any stretch, but I laughed quite a bit. So essentially, Zach Galifianakis and Will Ferrell are competing politicians. Well, Zach Galifianakis' character is typically not a politician, but he kind of gets dragged in by what is essentially like the Koch brothers, however you say that, Koch brothers in real life, but they're like portrayed as whoever in the film. Well, they're not by whoever. It's John Lithgow and Dan Aykroyd, so they're very famous people. But I forget the characters' names, but it's essentially the equivalent of them. And they are trying to pay off the campaign so that they can get this, you know, political agenda done that they need completed. And so Zach Galifianakis is brought in as a pawn. And then it's just crazy from there. Like, Will Ferrell's character is just this completely corrupt idiot politician. Like, it's absurd. What's most interesting to me is that this came out not in 2016 when Trump and everything started, but 2012. And so it is basically, in a way, foreshadowing some of the political climate that was to come, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, this was a funny movie. If you like those actors, you'll know you'll enjoy this film. If not, don't waste your time with it. This is another one I watched thanks to the digital copy that I do own. And it's one that when I worked at the movie store, I was able to get those codes. So I'm glad I didn't pay for it, but at the same time, I'm glad I watched it because it was enjoyable for, 90 minutes or whatever it is. So, it is what it is. It's a stupid, hard R comedy starring Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis. If that sounds interesting, check it out. If not, avoid it like the plague. But I ended up going right down the middle with The Campaign on my star rating. I gave 2012's The Campaign 2.5 out of 5 stars. This next film was literally we were scrolling through Netflix, my wife and I, and she said, we couldn't find anything to watch. So she goes, hit down 5 times and over to the left 12 or whatever the numbers were. I did it, and this movie came up, and we decided to hit play on it. She lasted maybe 10 minutes. I ended up watching the entire thing and really enjoying it. I'm talking about 2015's Heist, directed by Scott Mann. So this stars Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Robert De Niro, and Dave Bautista. If you're a wrestling fan, obviously you know who that is, or frankly, at this point, you probably know who Bautista is because he's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But and this was such a cool film. Like, I had no expectations coming into it whatsoever, but it's basically like John Q meets a gangster film. Like, that's probably the best way I can describe it. So Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character is down on his luck. He works at the casino that is run by Robert De Niro's character, and he needs money because his daughter is dying in the hospital, and he can't afford to pay the bills. And if he can't afford to pay the bills, she can't have this transplant that she needs or the surgery that she needs, whatever it is, and she will die. And so he decides, after being approached by Bautista's character, to join them on basically a heist to rob from the casino, because Morgan's character goes to De Niro, and De Niro basically tells him to screw off. And so, hey, he decides to take things into his own hands. So they try this heist, things go awry, and then basically it's Speed, because they're trapped on this bus with all these hostages and trying to figure out how they're going to, one, survive, and two, get this money to, pay for his daughter's medical needs. So That's what it's about. It's John Q, it's speed, and then it's a gangster film all rolled into one, and it's absurd, but it's so good. You know, I take that back. It's not even that it's absurd. It's just that there are very clearly plot holes here as you go along. Like, there are things that happen as the film progresses, you know, specifically more into Act 3, that when I'm watching it, you know, as I was watching it, I thought, oh man, this is awesome. Like, this works. I don't have any problems with this whatsoever. I was enwrapped in the story, engulfed in the story, and so I didn't care that these plot holes existed. But when you stop and think about it, you know, after I turned it off and was talking to my wife about it, I thought to myself, wow, some of these things that happened here just didn't make sense. But that's okay. Like, the film did a good enough job of keeping me wrapped up that I didn't notice them as I was watching it. So that's the mark of a solid film, in my opinion. I thought Bautista was so freaking good in this. Like, the only thing I'd seen him in previously is Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. He's good there, but he's playing a very, like, distinct, almost non-emotional character, and so to see him in this role, which is the complete opposite, was awesome. Like, I want to track down the rest of his films now and watch those, because it is very clear that he is an exceptionally talented actor. So I want to check out what else he has to offer. You know, I'm just a sucker for like a daddy-daughter love that goes on in films like this, and it worked for me so much. Like, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. I thought it was so much fun. I didn't want it to end. It was just an entertaining film that I am so happy we landed on, because I never would have put this on in a million years. You know, I would have expected it to be just one of those crappy late De Niro films, but man, he does a great job in this. There's just so much, like, again, that daddy-daughter relation, that father-daughter relationship takes place on two different levels in this film, and it just gets me. Like, it works for me, and it's just the way it is. I can't help it. So I love this one. I ended up giving Heist from 2015 4.5 out of 5 stars. Oh my God, you guys, this next film, I have goosebumps just getting ready to talk to you about this film, because oh my God, it's so amazing. So this one technically is a Criterion Collection film, but I do not own the disc, and I didn't watch it via the Criterion channel or anything like that. I watched this on Hulu, so that's why it's in this video and not in its own separate Cinefessions Conquers the Criterion Collection. So I am talking, of course, about 2019's Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and this is directed by Celine Sciamma, which again, I'm probably butchering that name. I apologize. In July, this disc was just staring me in the face because it had such a cool cover from Criterion, and it was the new one, so it was super popular. Everyone was picking it up, but I decided, you know what's on Hulu, I'm going to watch it first to make sure I like it, because frankly, it doesn't sound necessarily like something I'd love. So I waited on it, and boy, do I wish I didn't. But that's okay, because the next sale is coming up in November, and I will definitely be adding this to my collection. So Portrait of a Lady on Fire is essentially about this painter who is tasked with painting the portrait of this other woman who doesn't like getting her portrait painted. Like, she refuses to sit for her portrait to be painted. So she has to basically befriend her and try to, like, take images of her in her head that she can then go at the end of the day and try to paint her in order to get the art finished that she was commissioned to paint. The only word that could succinctly describe my feelings about Portrait of a Lady on Fire would be the word stunning. This is a masterpiece, in my opinion. I have never been more absorbed into a film so immediately by so seemingly so little than I was with Portrait of a Lady on Fire. There is a romance that exists in this film, and I was so obsessed with figuring out what would happen with this romance. Like, when these characters would, you know, just get close on screen, I could feel my heart beating as if I was, you know, one of the characters about to, you know, make a move or whatever the situation is. This film is just the single most passionate and intimate film I have ever seen. It blew me away. These characters are just so beautiful, not only physically, but just who they are was so engaging and interesting, and it just captured me. I don't know how else to say it. I don't want to talk too much more about it because I don't want you to have any spoilers going into this. Check this film out. If you have Hulu, it's on there for free. If you don't, it's on, available through the Criterion Collection. I promise you the $40 that it is, probably right now, or yeah, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon for like 26, 27 bucks if you want to, but it is so worth it. I cannot wait to own this disc to watch some of the special features here because it's so good. It is one of the most beautiful, one of the most stunning, one of the most intimate, one of the most passionate films I have ever watched, and I cannot recommend this enough. I ended up giving Portrait of a Lady on Fire from 2019 5 out of 5 stars, and seriously, even if it doesn't sound like something you'd be into, check it out because hopefully it'll hit you as kind of profoundly as it has hit me. I love this movie. It just reminds me of why I love film. I think I said that when I was talking about some of the movies in the Cinefessions Conquers the Criterion Collection episode, because sometimes you watch movies and you're like, yeah, that was fun. That was a popcorn flick. That was great. I enjoyed it. But then sometimes you watch something like Portrait of a Lady on Fire or Sex, Lies, and Videotape, or just Ghost World. Like, the list goes on, and then it just hits you that film is so incredibly powerful in so many different ways. It's so beautiful. Watch this movie. Watch this movie. Next up is a film from 1984, and this is one that is probably a classic from your childhood that you might love. For me, I don't remember ever watching it all the way through, but I'm talking about 1984's The Never-Ending Story, directed by Wolfgang Petersen. This is basically about a young boy who is trying to escape in his own way, I guess, and he finds this book and essentially escapes into this world of Fantasia, where all these crazy things are happening, and he's following this hero on his journey to try to save Fantasia. So I'll start off by saying what surprised me the most about this was how slow moving it was, especially for a film that's aimed at a middle grade audience like this one is. Some of the set design is fantastic. Some of these set pieces, the costumes are amazing. The world that they create is fascinating. It's so well drawn, but like the characters in that world, and especially our main character, I just didn't really care about. I found myself very disconnected from this as the film continued. I don't remember, like I said, ever watching this all the way through, but I do remember scenes from this as I was watching it. I remembered them specifically with like, I don't even know the name, like the giant dog thing, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but like that's a wonderful puppet. That's an awesome design, such a cool character, but again, it's just cool looking. It didn't really have much effect on me other than that. I don't know. The story was kind of strange, especially how it all wraps up and ends. It was very clearly a story about a boy trying to escape this negative world that he's living in for multiple reasons. But I don't know that it really did it in a way that was meaningful at all, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I thought it was okay, but it's not one I'll probably ever want to watch again. I don't know. I much prefer something like Labyrinth, which I don't love, frankly, but I enjoy. This one was okay, but if I'm going to watch something for its costume design or its set pieces, I'm going to go with Labyrinth over The Never-Ending Story. So I ended up giving 1984's The Never-Ending Story 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next up is a film that I have seen, honestly, more times than I can count at this point because it was a video store staple for me because I like the music so much. But this is 2013's Frozen, directed by Chris Buck and Jennifer Lee. So I think I talked about Frozen 2 maybe last month or 2 months ago, and I thought it was good, but not nearly on the same level as the first one. And so we decided to watch the first one again. And man, this movie is just so good. Like, I love it. I know that a lot of people don't really like this one as much now as they might have in the past. I've heard people talk about the hype really killed it for them. Just Frozen taking over our lives killed it for them, which I totally understand. But at the same time, I don't think that takes away from the film at all. My experience with this film is just as positive now as it was when I watched it back in 2013. The acting is wonderful. The voice acting across the board is great. The animation is stunning to look at, especially when you're watching, in high definition, whether it's 4K or 1080p. It's beautiful to look at. The songs, I know they have taken over our world and you're probably sick of them. I totally understand that, but they are still wonderful songs. I think it's such a fun musical. The story here, I think, is just so much more epic, more important than, and just, it has more weight to it than the sequel does. And so I think that's really the reason I like this one so much more. But I love Olaf. You know, I think he is just like the cutest character. I love him so much. But I don't know. I love this movie. I think it is so fantastic. So much like I have since the first time I watched it, I'm still giving 2013's Frozen 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, from 1993, is Dennis the Menace, directed by Nick Castle. So this, of course, is just the live-action, I don't know, telling of the Dennis the Menace story. Obviously, Dennis the Menace is a young boy who causes all types of mischief, and he is obsessed with bugging his next-door neighbor, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Wilson finds him to be just an incredible annoyance and, like the title says, a menace. The main plot here of this Dennis the Menace story is that Mr. Wilson is watching Dennis the Menace over the summer because his parents have to go on vacation. He is trying to win, or not win, I think he's already, well, no, he does win, I guess, this like prize for his yard, and he has this flower that he planted like 30 years ago or 40 years ago that only blooms once after 40 years, and so it's a story of, you know, is he going to see that? And then he also has these gold coins that go missing. I don't know. Like, it's just Dennis the Menace. There's not, like, it's just kind of all these weird, random things that happen throughout, and that's what you get with this movie. So this was fine. It's a family film. I think it's okay. Walter Matthau is fun as Mr. Wilson. His wife, though, is played by Joan Plowright, however you say that, and she's amazing. She's just such a wonderful character actress. She does such a fantastic job here, and she's just so sweet and charming, which, you know, Mr. Wilson definitely isn't. So it's great to have her playing alongside Mr. Wilson, because it just works really well. It also has Christopher Lloyd as like the this like dirty homeless guy who is just wonderful to see in this because it's Christopher Lloyd. I always love seeing Christopher Lloyd. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like basically like a typical 90s family film, like something like Home Alone, but not nearly as good, not nearly as memorable as that. But yeah, it's fine. It's available on Netflix. So if it's one that you like from your childhood, you can watch it that way. But if it's one that you've not really watched in the past, I feel like there's a better way to spend your 95 minutes or whatever it is. So it was fine, but nothing I want to go back to again. So I ended up giving Dennis the Menace from 1993 3 out of 5 stars. So I will address the elephant in the room. I know that I am a huge physical media collector. Look behind me. I have hundreds of discs right behind me. Every month I show you the new physical media that I picked up. But I only watched one physical disc last month, and that was A Quiet Place. I did a ton of streaming last month, and sometimes that's just the way it goes. But so anyway, A Quiet Place from 2018, directed by John Krasinski. This film was another one that just blew me away last month. I was not expecting it to be nearly as powerful as it was. That third act, oh my gosh, it is amazing. Again, I'm just a sucker for a good father-daughter story, and that's exactly what we have here. That plays a huge part in this film, and it's done so well. Again, that third act, I was in tears, okay? I'm not ashamed to admit it. I didn't expect that at all, but it was so, so powerful. I loved it. So so A Quiet Place. This is a post-apocalyptic film where there are these creatures who basically hunt by sound. And so if you're going to survive in this world, you have to not make any noises. And that's what they're trying to do. So they have 3 kids, and it's very difficult for kids not to make noise. We find out early on that Emily Blunt's character is pregnant, and having a newborn is going to be quite an issue. So they spend a lot of the film trying to build this like safe spot, this like shelter for the child, so that if he cries, he's still not heard by these creatures outside. But this is just so much more than I was expecting. Like, yes, it's a creature feature. Yes, it's a post-apocalyptic story, but the characters are what keep this movie moving. I loved John Krasinski in this and Emily Blunt. Like, their chemistry together is wonderful. The children actors, the kid actors, are so good in this. Like, they are asked to do a whole hell of a lot with emotion and just kind of living in this world. And they blow it out of the water. They do such a wonderful job, which is what makes this story work so well. I don't know. This one, I was shocked. Like, yes, I had high expectations because this did end up on my 5-star predictions list at the beginning of the year. So I thought I would enjoy it. But honestly, even though I am giving it 5 stars, I still didn't expect it to love it as much as I did. So So good. If you've not seen this for whatever reason, check it out. The sequel is coming out soon. Cannot wait to see it. So I gave 2018's A Quiet Place 5 out of 5 stars, and I absolutely loved it. Okay, so it turns out I was wrong earlier. The Pool, the first film I talked about, was Crocodiles, but Crawl from 2019, directed by Alexander Aja, or Alexander Asia, however you say that. This is actually a film with alligators in it. So there was a difference between the two films, which I didn't pick up on, which, Frank, I mean, they looked identical and they were both trying to kill people. So excuse me if I got that wrong. But so in Crawl, we follow this girl. She is in college at, I think, like, Florida or Florida State, I can't remember where, and she is going back to try to find her dad, who's not answering his phone as this hurricane approaches. Well, she eventually gets to their house to try to find him, and she does. Unfortunately, he's been knocked unconscious as this hurricane's approaching. She is stuck under the crawl space of the house, because that's where the dad got knocked out. While there, of course, the aforementioned alligators show up, and she's now trapped down there with her father, and they're trying to get out and survive not only the hurricane, but these alligators. So this is another one that is just as ridiculous as it sounds, but this one was definitely the Deadly Creature film, the Predator film I enjoyed more this past month. This was so good. So Alexander Aja does such fantastic films. Like, he did High Tension, which is amazing, Piranha 3D, which is just like some of the most fun I've ever had in the theater. And he also did The Hills Have Eyes, which is so good, the remake. I love him as a director, and Crawl was no different. He is such a talented director in the horror genre. What I think Crawl does better than The Pool is not so much the interpersonal relationships between the characters. I think those are pretty, kind of basic. Again, we have that father-daughter relationship, which I always enjoy watching. But what I think it does better are the effects. Like, it was, I mean, sure, they had to be using, CGI at points here, but boy, it looked really, really good. And it was difficult to tell when I was watching CGI, when I was watching a real alligator, and when I was watching maybe a mix of the two with some practical effects thrown in there. And so because of that, I was taken out of the story a lot less than I was during The Pool. So I loved that about The Crawl. I also thought the acting was excellent across the board. Our main actress, Kaya Scodelario, I know from like what I think is probably the most underrated YA film trilogy out there, Maze Runner. She does an excellent job there, but I think she's significantly better here. She's great in this, and so I think her performance really helps deliver on this entire film. Like, she is very strong, and she continues that from start to finish. So I thought she was great to watch. I just thought this film was a ton of fun. So not only are the alligators attacking, our main characters, but there are also all these other characters that are like around in the area, either trying to escape or maybe trying to loot, whatever the case may be. These alligators are like all over the place. And so just the sheer number of them makes this even more fun. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. So I gave Crawl from 2019 4 out of 5 stars. This next film, I'm not going to talk too much about. It's an independent film, and I don't want to dog it too much. It's called I Am Alone from 2015, and this one was directed by Robert A. Palmer. I'll say right off the bat, this one didn't do it for me. This is essentially a found footage zombie film, but... And as much as that sounds like that should be right up my alley, it just didn't work for me. So my biggest problems with this were, one, I thought there was really only one good actor. And in a found footage film, it has to be excellent across the board, as I already talked about, in order for it to be believable. That simply wasn't the case here. Second, I had a hell of a time trying to follow like the timeline that was being established here. At the beginning of the film, they place these like timestamps, I guess, or timestamps that kind of help place where they are or what time it is, things like that, which just completely disappears about halfway through the film, and they never bring it back. I just had a heck of a time trying to follow this story. I don't think it was well done at all, unfortunately. So again, I don't want to talk too much about it. I don't want to crap on an indie film like this. It just didn't do it for me. So I ended up giving I Am Alone from 2015 1 out of 5 stars. I actually did a double header of indie films that day. Unfortunately, neither of them were any good. The next one is called 30 Miles from Nowhere, and this is from 2018, directed by Caitlin Collar. So I know I didn't really want to talk too much about I Am Alone, but I'll talk a little bit more about 30 Miles from Nowhere because it felt like it had a bigger budget. It had more... it just felt a little bit more professional than the last film, which was very clearly a low budget independent film. So this obviously is a lower budget independent film too, but just on a different caliber. So basically these old college friends, as they say, are reunited after the death of one of their friends in this group that they hang out with. They go to this cabin, I think it's like in Wisconsin or something. Yeah, rural Wisconsin. And they are... like the host is the wife of the man who has passed, and they are just like insufferable people. Like, I hated spending time with them. They clearly don't really like each other that much at all, because they treat each other like absolute garbage. They have nothing positive to say to each other, essentially. They are just so negative the entire film. They are just garbage people that I had no interest in spending time with. But of course I did spend the entire 90 whatever minutes with them to finish the film. So I will admit there were a couple of interesting scenes here that were genuinely creepy. And I wanted to know what was going to happen. So, you know, there is that going for it. But other than that, I just thought it was just so lifeless, so meaningless, and just, again, the characters. Like, I don't have to like my characters, but at least make them interesting, at least make them engaging in some way. And none of these people are at all. I will also say that I am someone who virtually never guesses the end of a book or a movie or anything, and I saw the ending of this coming from a mile away. So if you are someone that's good at that, you'll probably know where this one is going, unfortunately. You know, and I will say, I thought it was well acted, as best as they could do with the script they were given. The director clearly has some talent, so I definitely would check out something else from this director in the future. This one, unfortunately, though, just didn't work. I thought it was, I don't know, pointless, a waste of my time, for lack of a better word. So I ended up giving 30 Miles from Nowhere from 2018 1.5 out of 5 stars. The last film I watched last month was Better Watch Out from 2016, directed by Chris Peckover. So yes, it was the end of August, and I decided to put on a Christmas-themed horror film. Don't ask me why. I guess that's just the way 2020 is going. But I've heard a ton of good things about this, and so I finally wanted to check it out. And I think it was on Amazon Prime. I was scrolling through there and came across it, and so that's how I ended up watching this one. And man, this one was another one that just really blew me away. Like, was not expecting this to be what it was at all. And it's one that is very difficult to talk about because, like, I don't want to give any spoilers. If you're interested in this, go check this movie out. It'll probably be worth your time. I really loved it. So essentially, this is a home invasion film, but done in an incredibly unique way. I'll say that. Our babysitter is watching this 12-year-old boy. Like, she's like 17, 18 or something. The boy's 12 and he has a crush on her. He's trying to do what he can to like hook up with her, which is absurd, but that's what he's trying to do. And then all of a sudden, like, these crazy things start happening in the house, and it turns into that type of film. So I love this genre. And I thought this just did such a good job with it, such a unique job with it. So I loved this. The acting was fantastic across the board. The main actress was excellent. Her name is Olivia DeJonge, I'm going to guess, and she was excellent. I will say, though, that it was very clear that she was trying to hide an accent throughout this, so if that bothers you as you're watching a film, then note that that's going to be there. But even with that said, I don't really think that hurt anything at all. It's just something I noticed as I was watching through it. But I love this movie. Again, I don't want to talk much about it because I don't want to spoil it for you. I want you to be as surprised as I was as the movie kept going, which, like, to be honest with you, at the beginning of this, I was thinking to myself, wow, this is bad. Like, there are things here that don't make sense. There are inconsistencies. Like, the acting is odd. Everything's so weird. But as it continues, it kind of all falls into place and just starts being more interesting and better as the film continues. So stick with it. It is definitely worth your time. And frankly, it doesn't take long to get to that point. So it's an awesome movie. I really, really enjoyed this. So I ended up giving Better Watch Out from 2016 4 out of 5 stars. All right, so that is going to do it for the 14 films I ended up watching back in August. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know down in the comments below, What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What do you love that I didn't? What did you hate that I loved? And also let me know what you watched last month. If you have a wrap-up video that you talk about what you watched, definitely link that down in the comments below. I'd love to take a look. All right, guys, as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Cinefessions here on YouTube. And if not, thank you anyway for watching this one. I really do appreciate that. All right, so that's going to do it for today. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.